Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Well, we may be on the precipice of the end of the congressional career of one George Santos. Tomorrow, the New York Republican will face his third expulsion vote on the floor in less than a year in office. Has to be some kind of record. There have been some key developments, though, since the last vote failed at the beginning of this month. Remember, it's a two-thirds vote. The House Ethics Committee released a scathing report finding, quote, substantial evidence that Santos broke federal law, defrauding his own donors, and then using their campaign contributions to personally enrich himself. The report alleges that Santos spent that money on resort stays, luxury goods, Botox, and the adult website OnlyFans. Now, that comes in addition to the 23-count federal indictment filed against the congressman in October that charges him with conspiracy, wire fraud, making false statements, falsifying records, identity theft, credit card fraud, money laundering, and theft of public funds. And even beyond all that, which is a lot, George Santos is just an enormous embarrassment to his party and to the institution of Congress. As he walks the halls of Congress, people cringe. He's a ludicrous figure wrapped up in a web of ridiculous scandals and lies.
A local news website is reporting a disabled veteran is calling out Congressman George Santos, claiming the lawmaker scammed him out of $3,000 for his dying dog's life-saving surgery.
Baruch College, NYU, Goldman Sachs, and Citigroup all tell NBC News they have no record of Santos, despite being listed on his campaign biography.
George Santos didn't even go to Baruch College, so by extension, George Santos did not play for Baruch's championship volleyball team, nor did George Santos get two knee replacements because of his vaunted volleyball career playing there.
I've always joked with friends and circles, even in the campaign, I'd say, guys, I'm Jewish. Remember, I was raised Catholic.
And there is simply no evidence that your mother ever worked at the World Trade Center at all.
Did you know that Congressman George Santos also claims he was the target of an assassination attempt, which required him being put under official police protection?
Bloomberg reported that George Santos bragged to donors in 2021 that he was a producer on the infamous Spider-Man Broadway musical.
Indicted Republican Congressman George Santos was seen leaving a colleague's office carrying a mysterious baby. And when he was asked if the baby was his, he replied, "Not yet."
Okay, now there's obviously a lot of evidence to suggest that George Santos probably shouldn't be a member of the United States Congress. But the biggest reason that he is facing a real threat of expulsion tomorrow on the third try is because it is politically expedient for a certain wing of the Republican Party, particularly the House caucus. There are 5 members from New York in the House Republican caucus who want to keep their seats in districts Joe Biden won, despite the fact that they're all, down the line Republicans. And it would be a good idea for them, for all the Republicans in moderate districts, to distance themselves from Santos. It's a show of independence from the Republican Party line by voting to get rid of him, but it doesn't cost them anything. They're not voting against any priorities. It doesn't cross Donald Trump. So it's an easy win. And it's important to remember that George Santos is a member of Congress because of Donald Trump. Full stop. And the Trump base. He had nothing to do with politics before becoming a diehard Trump fan. He founded a grassroots group supporting then-president's re-election campaign. And after both Trump and Santos lost their 2020 races, Santos actually ran the first time in 2020, Santos claimed the elections were stolen, and he attended Trump's speech on the morning of January 6th. And then he rode the MAGA train to victory last year, unopposed for the Republican nomination. He's a Trump guy. And of course, all of the qualities that make that guy, George Santos, so embarrassing are the same ones exhibited by the likely Republican presidential nominee, the leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. The constant compulsive lying, the pathological need for attention, no matter how negative, the total disregard for the rule of law. But Santos is just one particularly colorful side of the MAGA coin. Last night I spoke to Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, who told me he would vote to expel Santos this time, after previously voting no, and made an important point about how Santos compares to the MAGA king and his most ardent defenders.
The logic for my vote last time was simply this. We don't want to set a precedent where people are being expelled without either a criminal conviction in, federal or state court, or else an ethics finding that they've engaged in serious misconduct that we can a judge once we're able to read the report. You know, the only argument I could torture out for him now is that all of the lies he told, which he certainly did tell, and the evidence is overwhelming, do not add up to Donald Trump's big lie, which still a majority of the Republican caucus stands by.
It's a good point. I mean, 147 Republican members of Congress voted to overturn the 2020 election. Almost all of them are still in office. Some of the most active coup plotters, people who labored intensely on the plot to end American constitutional governance, a plot that is implicated now in two different sets of criminal charges, to deny the people of this country the right to choose their leader, the most fundamental one. Those people remain in that caucus, the people that plotted, totally unscathed, and in some ways more or less anonymous. You probably wouldn't even recognize some of them. Like this guy. I mean, we've talked about him before, but this is Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. By many accounts, he was one of the most central coup plotters in all of Congress. It was Perry that introduced Donald Trump to Jeffrey Clark. That's the low-level official at the Department of Justice who was supportive of Trump's claim the election was stolen. The January 6th committee revealed that Perry even brought Clark to the White House to meet Trump in late December 2020. Trump then considered firing the acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen and replacing him with Clark in order to use the Department of Justice to steal the election. This was a Perry-Trump-Clark plot. Perry was a focus of the January 6th committee's investigation, receiving a subpoena that he just flat out ignored. Last summer, the FBI seized Perry's phone, and special counsel Jack Smith has also sought information from Perry since he took over the federal investigation. Now, a new court filing in that case has revealed a slew of damning text messages that Congressman Perry sent to Jeffrey Clark and many others in the Trump orbit in the wake of the 2020 election. In the midst of the effort to elevate Clark to top role of DOJ, right, where he could send out that letter saying, the Department of Justice doesn't know if the ballots are legit, right? Perry texted him, quote, "You are the man. I have confirmed it. God does what he does for a reason." Between the end of December and January 5th, 2021, Congressman Perry also texted a former DOJ colleague and embraced a plan to have then Vice President Mike Pence, quote, admit testimony prior to the counting of the electoral votes on the 6th. Perry agreed to sell the idea with a call to Trump, Pence, and Trump advisor John Eastman, but Perry later alerted him that Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, will not allow access. Yeah, I'll bet. Yet that guy, Scott Perry, the coup plotter, remains a member of Congress in good standing. In fact, tomorrow, he's going to stand inside the well of the House and vote on whether to expel George Santos from that body.